with Mac and Mac, we add to the mix another insightful individual. Well, John's insightful. I just kind of moved the ball around. We'll get more out of Dave Zangaro for the next 20, 25 minutes than you will out of me. That's for damn sure. DZ, how you be?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
Doing well, Dave. I assume you had this trip booked back in July, late July?
Not quite that long ago. I'll tell you what, though, when we were in Arizona during the year, I took a good look around. Just put it in the back of my mind.
Got used to the lay of the land?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. When did you realize this team was really, really good and say, oh, they got a shot?
I mean, I think I realized the roster was really good in training camp, but you don't let yourself get there at that point. I mean, you looked around and you thought, I remember thinking in training camp, like, I haven't covered a team without a glaring weakness somewhere. And this team just didn't have a glaring weakness. Now, at the time, we didn't know Jalen Hurts was going to take the step that he took. And that was a big – it's funny, like, he answered that question so quickly this year, but it was a question coming into the year. How good was he going to be? We all thought he was going to get better, but I don't know if anyone saw this type of jump coming. Once you saw him make that kind of jump and you saw them – once you're like 6-0, you start thinking, okay, this team's probably pretty good. And then, it's once you realize they have the chance to get the 1 seed, then there's such an advantage to that now. So if you have an opportunity to do that, and once they had, 3/4 of the way through the season, it looks like they're going to get the number 1 seed. Then you start saying, okay, I mean, if they get the 1 seed, it's going to be really hard for any team to come to Philly and beat them. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, and I love the people say, oh, the 1 seed isn't that important. Green Bay and Tennessee got picked off right away. Check the history. Being the 1 seed definitely helps. And we've got 2 1 seeds left standing in the Super Bowl. It was kind of a key. But since you went to camp, well, with 1 week to go in camp, it was going to be Jaquiski Tartt as the starter.
No, it wasn't. But but yeah, they didn't have.
Well, then tell me who is going to be Johnny Mac.
It was going to be Anthony Harris.
Okay.
Jaquiski was not in the conversation.
Will Anthony Harris get a ring since he's back on the practice squad?
Oh, sure.
If they win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, he'll get a ring. But how big was that? How big was that trade for CJ Gardner-Johnson?
It was huge.
Gigantic.
Yeah, because at the time, like, Reid Blankenship has ended up playing really well.
Yeah.
At the time, we had no idea he was going to do that. He had a good camp, but you never think that it's going to translate. So getting another player on the back end, because if you look at and still to this day, if you look at this defense, like, the weakness is inside in the secondary and with the linebackers who are pretty good too. You're trying to find a weakness at this point, but coming into camp, you wondered about the safety position. It was like, you're right, that was the one glaring weakness. But once they got CJ, I knew there would be some growing pains because he was changing positions. But if you watched him in New Orleans, he had all the prerequisite abilities to play safety, and he started off slow. I mean, there were moments early on, and he played 10 days after the trade. It was kind of a learn on the fly thing with him, but I thought he handled it really well. I thought the defense handled it well. They made it digestible for him. And then we saw his playmaking ability. All those interceptions he had weren't necessarily forced by him, but he made the plays on the back end, and that matters too. So I thought he really changed this defense. And then once Reid ended up being such a pleasant surprise playing as well as he did, you feel pretty good about him. And now you have both safeties about to be free agents. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but not crazy to think Reid Blankenship could be a starter next year.
Middle Tennessee State safety factory, Dave Zangaro, with Kevin Byard and Reid Blankenship. Yeah, pretty amazing. The Eagle and that brings up Howie's role in all this. It's been a magical season for him. If you go all the way back, Jody and I have been talking about this. The Eagles tried to trade for Calvin Ridley. If that comes through and he isn't on his app betting on whatever he was betting on, A.J. Brown's not here. Christian Kirk, if Jacksonville doesn't overpay him, he might be here. No A.J. Brown. You go all the way back even farther, The Eagles were trying to convince, Russell Wilson. You think about coming here? Deshaun Watson, maybe? Think about the Eagles? They weren't sure about Jalen Hurts. So you have to have some luck involved. And, people get upset that you don't make immediate moves, but all of a sudden the failure to get one of those receivers turns into A.J. Brown. Hassan Reddick. I mean, what a free agent signing. He's already one of the best free agent signings in Eagles history. He's right there with Malcolm and your buddy Brandon Brooks. He's been that impactful. Who's responsible? Who's more responsible, the coaching staff or Howie Roseman for this personnel? I bring this up because of Julian Love and his comments.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think those comments are funny because Nick's done a really good job.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's one thing to have talent. It's another to make it all work for you and to make all that talent buy into what you're trying to do. If you're asking me between Howie and Nick, I mean, Howie put this team together and there was some luck involved, sure, but I don't think another GM has the second move ready better than Howie Roseman. That meaning, the first thing he tries doesn't work. He's ready with that plan. I don't know how many GMs pull off that trade for A.J. Brown. But he's always willing to just find ways to acquire talent. And the CJ trade, we know he's trade happy and some of them don't work out. Robert Quinn certainly has not worked out. But I that's something I appreciate about Howie is that he's always willing to find ways to get guys, whether that's trading for A.J. Brown, somehow making it work out that you get James Bradbury as a free agent in May. There's some luck involved, sure, but you have to give him some credit too, because I think some of it's foresight and I think some of it's just willingness to pull the trigger when those moves are there, when sometimes other GMs just won't do it. There's no trade too big or small for Howie. And it makes it fun to follow the team because, and he'll tell you all the time, and people were groaning here in mid-March.
Oh, yeah.
Just Hassan Reddick. And I mean, it's a good lesson to remember going forward because they added.
Nobody will remember.
They added A.J. Brown, CJ Gardner-Johnson, James Bradbury well after the start of free agency. So, especially with this GM, you have to remember that, as he says, the talent acquisition phase never ends.
That's a good way to look at it. I did catch the re-air of Julian Love on the Good Morning Football yesterday. My follow-up question would have been, do you feel the same way about your coach, Brian Daboll, that it's a players' league?
By the way, they kind of go to them in the saying that.
Yeah, it's not like he
they show him the video and they go, what do you think about this? No, what do you really think about this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and by the way,
he went there on his own that Nick Sirianni was being carried by his players. He could have just stopped it. Yeah, I don't think coaches should act like that. He chose to continue the conversation a little bit further. And I'm just noting that I'm doubting he would say the same thing about Brian Daboll. It's very easy to take that shot at somebody else's coach. Dare you to take that shot at your own coach. I don't think he was going to go there. All right, your comparison between Howie and Sirianni, certainly a characteristic they have in common, aggressiveness. Who's more aggressive, Howie or Nick?
I don't know how to answer that because it's so different. I think, I can't answer that because it's not apples to oranges. It's apples to doorknobs. It doesn't compute. But I can tell you, that's what the organization wants. The organization wants aggressive mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
That's Jeffrey Lurie. It is he sets the tone for the rest of the organization. I'm not saying that Howie or Nick wouldn't be aggressive without him, but there's a pretty clear directive from the very highest levels of this organization that we're an aggressive organization. We're going to do some things that might be unpopular, that might buck trends, and we're okay with that because we're convicted in what we're doing and we have reasons why we're doing it. It doesn't mean it's always going to work out, but you can go from, the roster building exercise, this is where we're going to be aggressive for these types of players. And then it also goes onto the football field. We're going to go for it on fourth down because our data says it makes more sense. We have the players to get it done. So it's an aggressive mindset throughout the organization, but it's not reckless. And I think that's a key that a lot of people miss. They're aggressive with conviction because they've done the research and they've done the work to understand why they should be aggressive.
Dave, you bring up an interesting point. Maybe we say Howie versus Nick, not you, but me. Maybe we should look upward because I think it was Joe Banner, but if it wasn't, I'll try to find out who. But there was a recent sort of talking about GMs in the NFL, talking about Howie Roseman. Howie has the luxury to make mistakes that other people don't because they're always GMing for their job, so to speak. And they can't go outside of the box. Very volatile industry, obviously. And you make a couple mistakes and you're out on the street. Jeffrey's been very loyal to Howie Roseman. I think rightfully so. He's one of the best GMs in football, but you got to have an owner willing to get through those hiccups when they come about.
Yeah, ownership matters. And Jeffrey's been a very good owner. There's something to be said for patience. I think a lot of organizations aren't patient, whether it's with the head coach, the GM, or the young quarterback. And there's something to be said for it. And it can't be blind patience. It can't be, I like this guy, so I'm going to give him as much time as he wants. Like, that's not wise. But if you believe, like, he believes in Howie Roseman. And I don't think that's blind faith. I think at times he's blinded a little bit by Howie's demeanor, and I think Howie really knows how to speak Jeffrey's language. So I think that's helped him at times during his career. But I mean, Howie backs it up too. It's what he's done here is pretty impressive, and the Eagles should be a case study for a lot of organizations in the league. And I'm not saying it's easy, but there are things that they've done better than other organizations that some places could learn from if they weren't so stubborn and kind of set in their ways. You watch some of these organizations, and it's like they don't know what they're doing. Yeah. They really don't. I mean, and I'm not saying Jeffrey knows what he's doing all the time because there have been hiccups, but for the most part, they seem to kind of get it.
Along those lines, Dave, I said this here yesterday on the show. See if you agree or disagree. We know it's at stake next Sunday. That would be Super Bowl championship, second one in 5 years. But also the gold standard moniker of the National Football League. I think the winner of this game gets to claim that title. If Kansas City wins 5 straight championship appearances, 2 Super Bowl wins, Mahomes and Andy Reid, it's theirs. No questions asked. But if the Eagles win, I think Jeff Lurie can finally claim the gold standard moniker of the National Football League. Agree or disagree?
No, I'm not there yet. Because I mean, they missed the playoffs 2 years ago. Last year, they snuck in and got walloped in the wild card round. So I don't even think he would claim it right now.
Then who would you give it to?
The Chiefs.
If the Eagles win this game, you would not put them ahead of the Chiefs.
No, when you're talking about organizational stability and like the Chiefs are in territory where they're just in big games every year. And the Eagles aren't in big games every year. Not yet, at least. I mean, they were in a wild card game that they got smoked in last year. And that's not a bad thing. They were building toward this. But this is like the beginning point for that. If they're going to be the gold standard, which it's kind of a that doesn't mean anything. Yeah. But like if they're going to be that gold standard, I think you have to be playing in conference championship games year after year. I think that's what Jeffrey meant when he said it all those years ago. It's like we want to be legitimate contenders every year, and they have not been legitimate contenders every year. So this could be the start of that, but I don't think it's them reaching that point.
Okay.
Let's talk about somebody who is a legitimate contender every year. Andy Reid and the Chiefs. As Jody mentioned, 5 straight championship games, 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. We know he's the first ballot Hall of Famer. But when he was here, I say this all the time, Dave, and I want to get your opinion on it. I still think everything the Eagles do from a football perspective, they were essentially taught by Andy Reid. his foundation. Not that he's responsible for this success. He's been gone for a long time. But we hear when Howie drafted Cam Jurgens, luxury pick in the second round, everybody wanted Nakobe Dean. They got them both. Howie said, hey, if they're even, I'm taking the offensive lineman or the defensive lineman. Kind of got taught that by Andy Reid, didn't he? This whole football philosophy in Philadelphia is really Andy Reid's, isn't it?
It is building in the trenches, and it's really funny. I wrote about this last week that in this league where Nick won't tell us if the long snapper has a jammed finger for competitive advantage. The Eagles broadcast to the world that this is their organizational building philosophy.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't try to hide it. They tell everyone, this is why we think we're good. And this is what we're going to prioritize this. It's so kind of comical to me that, they're so secretive about some things. And then, I mean, they'll tell anyone who listens that they build through the trenches and they're proud of it. I guess it's harder to hide that. It's pretty obvious. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And it works for them. And I mean, the craziest thing is the 3 Andy Reid players are still on this team and playing at a high level. I don't think anyone saw that coming when Andy left in 2012, but yeah, I mean, his legacy goes beyond just those individual players. It became a philosophy of the organization, and then it continued when Jeff Stoutland arrived in 2013 after Andy left. It's really funny that Stout and Andy weren't here at the same time, because it's like they're 2 of the most important people in terms of how this team builds, and there was no overlap. I mean, Chip brought Stout here, but it's right there. They don't hide it. They build through the trenches. They'll spend money in the trenches, and it's a wise move, because you feel, I do matchups. I write matchups every week for every game, and you go into it and you say, well, I mean, they're going to win in the trenches, and if they win in the trenches, they at least have a shot to win the game. I'm not saying they're going to win the game, but even in the Super Bowl, they have a chance to win this game, because I think they're going to win both matchups in the trenches, and it's not going to be as lopsided as it's been in some other games, but because the guy who taught them that philosophy is coaching in Kansas City, and they have pretty good lines too, but the Eagles are better.
All right, Dave, back to the magnitude of this game. At some point during the year, we all realized the Eagles are going to be real good, so we started using the phrase, the Super Bowl window. And the window is open, and they got to climb to it this week and win it. Because according to Jerry Jones, they are all in on this season. And afterwards, they're following right in that Rams' footsteps of going immediately backwards. A little sour grapes out of Jerry Jones yesterday. What the hell's he talking about?
Yeah, I don't know if he was paying attention. Eagles might have the 10th pick in the draft and the 31st or 32nd pick. So, I mean, they haven't mortgaged the future. Now, this offseason is going to be tricky, because you're going to try to pay Jalen, and then you have all these free agents come and due, and you're probably not going to be able to sign all of them. But, they're not in a bad spot. They're really not, especially if you have the quarterback, and they have the quarterback. So the building becomes different, like in terms of like salary cap allocation, when you have the quarterback getting paid a ton, but it'll be backloaded too. So it's not like it's going to inhibit them immediately, in 4 years or 3 or 4 years, when the big money on that next deal starts to come in, then it gets trickier. But by then, presumably the salary cap keeps rising. That's why you backload deals in the first place. And Howie's so good at structuring those contracts like that. The rest of the league has taken note of that, and they've followed. It's funny. You look at Eagles contracts and you look around the league and you go, oh yeah, they're catching on now. There's some dummy years added to these contracts because they figured out that loophole. But Howie's always on the cutting edge of that. It's not going to be easy to do it, but the window's open as long as he's the GM and they have Jalen as the quarterback, and things can change. We've seen that here before. We thought we had the quarterback once before, right? And it didn't work out, but that can't stop you from just believing in Jalen, believing that you're going to pay him and you're going to build around him. And there's always going to be questions about, will his play style allow him to stay healthy? What's the shelf life on a quarterback who plays with that style? I can't answer those questions, but you got to try to win while you have them, and they have them.
Yeah, I thought it was a tortured comparison for the simple reason that Matthew Stafford's a veteran quarterback at the end of his career, paid a lot. Jalen Hurts is 24, hasn't gotten to a second deal. Now, I brought up Joe Banner before. I'm going to bring him up again, Dave. He did something on the 33rd team this week where he said he put the number at 47 to 52 million average annual value for Jalen Hurts on a possible extension. Now you bring up, and he's already done this, how he's done this with AJ Brown. The big money doesn't kick in till the third year because AJ had that final year on his rookie deal. He's going to do the same thing with Jalen Hurts. So the window is going to stay open for a little bit. But at some point, when you're paying the quarterback, let's say 47, the low end of that spectrum, you're going to have to start building the roster a different way. We saw it with Russell Wilson, right? I mean, that's just how it works.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the draft comes into play. And you're trying to get good, cheap players. And so I think we started to see that, maybe not on purpose, but with this past draft where you get Jordan Davis and you get Cam Jurgens, because in a year, maybe you don't have Fletcher Cox. Maybe you don't have Jason Kelsey pulling in, 14 mil a year. What's Jason at, like 13? Whatever he's at. So, I mean, those are big chunks. They're not the big piece of the pie, which is going to be Jalen, but there are these other chunks that you have to figure out. They have 2 more first-round picks coming this year. You got to try to land impact players at positions where you're not going to want to pay veterans. So say you let James Bradbury walk. This team has not drafted corners in early rounds recently. Might be time to do that. Might be time to try to find your Sauce Gardner, which I don't know if those guys grow on trees, but might be time to try to find a cheap complement to Darius Slay, who has a big deal. Might be time to find another defensive tackle or a defensive end who won't be getting paid a ton of money. That's where the draft really comes into play.
All right. Don't want to look at the Eagles' future positional needs at 2023 until we get through 2022 at running back. They've had a nice run here these last couple of weeks, playoff weeks, and all 3 running backs have contributed, gotten the job done. I'm a Miles Sanders guy, and I know that it's trending toward Miles not going to be here, but if he has a big Super Bowl, maybe that changes it. How are they going to deploy their running backs? Do you even want to take a guess ahead of time? Will it be dictated by how the game's going? What do you think their game plan is to run the football coming into the Super Bowl, and who's going to be getting it the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think Miles is still their number 1 back. I think the knee injury has hampered him a little bit, but you have 1 game left, so you kind of empty the tank there. And Kenny's role, he's getting a little bit more, but it really hasn't changed. I mean, he's still third down
they've just
back.
been blowing out people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the second half, what does it matter what they did in the second half? They were trying to get to the end of the game, right?
In both games, and I think that's why we didn't see Miles a ton in these second halves. So Kenny's still their third down guy. He's still the 2-minute guy. He's played great, and I think he will have a good role in the Super Bowl. I think he's the guy that you mix in. Boston might be left out a little bit. Maybe you get him in the red zone. He's so good down in those tight areas. But I think for the most part, it's going to be Miles and then Kenny spelling him. I'm curious to see what the game plan looks like in the Super Bowl. There are different schools of thought here because I think you can throw on their corners. They're young corners. But the Eagles can run the football. They can run the football against anyone. And they did that against San Francisco. And there's the school of thought that, if we're running the football and we're going on these long drives, 15's on the sideline. And if you can limit his possessions, you're, in theory, limiting his opportunity to score points. So I think we'll see a balanced team, but I also think it's going to kind of be dictated by what's working once they get out there.
All right, Shane. Shane, I called you Shane. I want you to put on your Shane Steichen hat is where it was going, Dave. Besides getting the Carolina job on Saturday, what do you want to do? What do you want to call? Well, how do you want to attack this Kansas City defense? If you were in charge, what do you go? Because I think people have been waiting for the passing game. I don't even think necessarily it's been they don't want to throw the ball, or Jalen's shoulder. I think it's been, these are blowouts. So, get the heck out. Just run the football, get to the end of the game, get out as healthy as possible. Do you want to start throwing the ball against this team?
Yeah, because I think you're going to need to score points. And that's not the way he should look at it. That's why I'm looking at it. Like, you need points. You're going to need points because the other team's going to score points. You're going to, as good as you think your defense is, they're going to. They're
not going to ep and gut him, Dave. Jonathan Gannon finally got popular with the fan base. They're not going to ep and gut him.
He should have done that a few years ago.
Yeah, he should have done it day one. He would have won them over.
Yeah, it's funny. So yesterday, I hadn't seen it, and we were shooting something, and he walked out, and someone made mention of it, and I was like, "What are they talking about?" And someone sent it to me. I was like, "Oh, that's different." It's like, I think you can throw on this team. Their corners are so young. L'Jarius Sneed's okay. He's their best corner. He might travel with AJ Brown. You still feel pretty good about AJ Brown against L'Jarius Sneed. The rest of their corners are rookies. You can throw on them, but running on them can also be a way to neutralize Chris Jones a little bit. And he's really where I start if I'm offensively game planning. You got to know where he is on every play. He's a man.
He's a good player. Man, he's a good player.
Yeah, as good as Hassan Reddick's been, I can make an argument that Chris Jones is the best defensive player in this game. He's been wrecking every snap. And the Eagles have a great offensive line, but Landon Dickerson's the guy who's probably going to see him the most, and Landon has that hyperextended elbow.
Yeah.
If you're taking on Chris Jones, you don't want to be less than 100%. And I'm also curious to see if they try that. He plays edge sometimes. Will they try to put him out on Lane Johnson, who we know the bull rush is his trouble spot right now, taking on bull rushes. Taking on a bull rush from Chris Jones is about as hard as it gets in this league. So I'd imagine we'll see them test him pretty early too.
All right, Dave Gonzalez, this will be telling. I'm going to set an under-over for you, and we will then figure out whether you think the Eagles are going to win the game or not, or at least I am. Probably not for everybody else. 59 yards. Over, under rushing yards for Jalen Hurts in the game.
Over.
If that's the case, Eagles win the game, right?
I think so. And that's not like design runs. That's everything. So
any running plays.
I think in a game like this, there are going to be moments where he just takes off. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I could see there being moments where he takes off and moves the sticks. Ideally, you want to find a good blend of that, and he's done a really good job of that this year. Like last year was just nothing's there, head down, run. This year it's been nothing's there, wait for it. Like I can buy some time, I can look around. So there needs to be a good mixture. But I think Spags is going to try to heat him up a little bit. And Jalen's best answer to that sometimes is just get the heck out of there.
Yeah. I think that would be a good foreshadowing for the Philadelphia Eagles. If Jalen Hurts gets that much on the ground, Dave Zangaro at the Zangaro NBCS. Read him at NBCsports.com/Philadelphia. You're heading out over the weekend, Dave. Who's going to win the football game?
I'm leaning toward the Eagles, but very slightly right now. And I could change it. This is a really good team. I think the Eagles are the better balanced team. I think they have more good players. They're putting this as simple as possible. Like they have a better roster. They have more good players than the Chiefs.
I agree. 15. I was doing the top 15 players in this game, Dave, real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas City's very top heavy. I considered putting Mahomes 1, Jones 2, Kelsey 3. I ended up putting Lane ahead of Kelsey. They're very top heavy, but then it becomes Eagles, pretty much all the way down. Just a deeper, more well-rounded team.
They are. 15 scares the heck out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, He's a pretty good player. Dave Zangaro, thank you very much for jumping in with us today. Safe. We'll be checking out you, the podcast, Ruben, and reading everything on NBC Sports Philly. Have a safe flight out to Arizona.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
That is Dave Zangaro from NBC Sports Philly.
By the way, I think I said I was stumbling around with Shane Steichen. He's going for the Indianapolis job. I think I said Carolina. Carolina's already got
thinking about
yeah.
the Deuce Staley question I asked you from previously. I put it to you, John McMullen. If Jalen Hurts rushes for 60 yards, can the Eagles lose the game?
Yes, only because, Patrick Mahomes, like Dave said, 15. Yeah, I mean, this guy's a little bit different. I compared it to a home run. If you got the best home run hitter and he's hot, all of a sudden everything is thrown out. All the typical metrics are thrown out if he has one of those games. So, yes, but it would be a very good sign if he was over, what'd you have, 59?
Yeah.
If he's over, that's a very good sign. I would say that.
If he rushes for 60, I really like the Eagles' chances because I think he's going to throw. He hadn't thrown for 200 yards yet here in the postseason. I believe the Eagles are going to throw it more after having two really good running games. I don't think it's going to be as big a factor in the Super Bowl. I think it'll be a little bit more drop back stuff with Jalen either throwing it or pulling it down and running it. And if he makes some chunk plays with his legs, that could be the difference in the game. All right, Jody Mac, the Mac guys coming back to put a